I know a lot of you are going to agree with me on this one, but I think one of the best harvests that the garden has to give us is actually at the very end of the season. Right now, when everything is crispy and brown and dry, there's one harvest left that's really underrated in my opinion. I love seed saving because it allows us to not only be more self-sufficient, which isn't really the purpose of gardening in my opinion, but it also does the opposite. It gives you the opportunity to build community because you can save those seeds from your garden and you can swap them with other people. More than that, seed saving is an excellent way to save money, since you could buy a pack of really nice expensive seeds one year and then never have to buy it again because you just saved the seeds from the plants that you grew. We actually just did a whole episode about seed saving on the Garden Girls podcast, and we just kind of talked about a few of our favorites. Today I thought we would see what there is that we can save from seed today and just talk a little bit about why I like to save the seeds that I save. I think seed saving is an area of gardening that intimidates a lot of people, but it's actually a lot simpler than it sounds. Like, we're really just waiting until whatever plant it is reaches full maturity and picking those seeds. There's very few instances where we have to do like additional processing in order to keep those seeds viable. But it's also really cool because you get to have different generations of your seeds. So I could be growing the great grandchild of the provider green beans that I originally bought for the first time 5 years ago. Over time too, those seeds become more adapted to your climate. So the plants that do the best and thrive the most and have the most ripe seed pods for us to pick from, you pick that particular set of genetics that did well in your microclimate and you continue that lineage over years and years and years. It's going to become more resistant to the pests that you're most commonly seeing in your garden. It's going to become more cold tolerant. It's a really cool way to kind of customize your seeds. So the trickiest part about seed saving is you need to know the difference between what you can save as a seed and what you can't. But it's actually not that hard to understand. So basically we have hybrid seeds and we have open pollinated seeds. Hybrid seeds we cannot save because they are created through the process of a manual hand pollination. So there's human intervention involved to create our hybrid seeds and have them come true to type. If you try to plant a hybrid broccoli after it's gone to seed, you try to replant those seeds, you may not get the same type of broccoli that you got as before because the genetics just aren't as stable. In contrast with open pollinated, which means it's pollinated through natural means, through bugs moving that pollen from one place to another or through wind, the genetics with these are just a little bit stronger. I will say there's one little thing that complicates this with open pollinated varieties. So for example, I was growing 4 different kinds of cucumbers this summer, and I was growing them all in a very close together space. So if I had tried to save seeds from any of those 4 different types of open pollinated cucumbers, I would have gotten some kind of hybrid as a result. It may still have been a delicious cucumber, but it would not have been a suyo or a lemon cucumber or a market more anymore because they would have cross-pollinated just from being in such close quarters. Now that doesn't mean you can't save them, but when it comes to things like squash, for example, sometimes those cross-pollinations can result in a fruit that is toxic. Now squash is very easy to tell it's gone toxic because it will taste really bad, and you can come up with some really cool, unique varieties this way, but it's just important to be aware of the risks. When you're deciding on which plant you're going to save seeds from, if you've got multiple options, it's a good idea to try to choose strong genetics. So that could mean for you that you're picking the plant that produced the largest fruit, the most flavorful fruit, the plant that showed the most resistance to the diseases and pests that you find in your yard. But what's cool about that is you really do kind of get to make up your own mind about what's important to you when it comes to choosing for genetics. There's not really like a wrong answer. I mean, I guess the wrong answer would be to pick like the weakest plant, but other than that, you can kind of just experiment. When you harvest those seeds can vary a little bit depending on the plant type. Generally speaking, you're looking to harvest from plants with fruit that is fully mature, fully developed. In some cases, you actually want it to be a little bit beyond fully ripened. In the case of something like a bean pod, we want it to be crispy and dry on the vine before we even pick it. As for what seeds I'm saving right now, early October in Zone 6B, I did just do some dill. Dill will self-sow really readily if you let it go to flower, which I did. I did let it go to flower, and I had a couple people be like, wow, that's so funny that you don't see that as a bad thing that your plant bolted. And I truly don't. I do this all the time in the garden. I'll let things go to seed on purpose, not just for my own benefit, but because it also attracts a ton of beneficial pollinators and other bugs that are just really good for the garden. So I don't see it as a bad thing at all when certain plants end up flowering and going to seed. I think dill looks beautiful at every stage of its life cycle. Once it goes to seed, the whole stalk kind of turns brown. You get this like crispy brown umbrella that you can kind of just either clip the whole head of the dill flower off into a paper bag, which is probably the easiest way to save your seeds, honestly. Like, seed saving does not have to be this big complicated venture. You can literally just chop off a dead flower into a paper bag, label it, and leave it somewhere for next year. Or you can take it even one step further and just pinch off some of those seeds right where you are and sprinkle them in the dirt. Now, depending on where you live, this may or may not work. If it gets too cold over the winter, they may not overwinter. If you have a shorter season, they may not have time to germinate, sprout, and actually produce something harvestable before your first frost date. But it's fun to experiment with. Sometimes with things like that, I'll do a little bit of both. I'll just sprinkle some as I'm harvesting the actual bloom and then just throw the rest in a bag for later. Also really like to save beans. I grow a couple different kinds of beans in the garden. The biggest one that I grow is a Provider green bean, called Provider because it's just so prolific and productive, and it really is the most productive green bean plant. This year I also did a yellow wax bean. Those did pretty well too, honestly. They did great. A little bit less productive than a Provider green bean, but I'll be saving seeds from those as well. I also have scarlet runner beans, which are just such beautiful plants at all stages, but of course you get this amazing surprise when you crack open the pod and the beans themselves are this bright hot pink. With any of our beans, we do just want to let them fully dry on the vine before we pick them. Sometimes this requires kind of a reframe, right? Because we all kind of default, I think, to ripping things out of the garden as soon as they start to not look so pretty. And this time of year, there's a lot more things that don't look super pretty than things that do look pretty, because things are getting brown and crispy, and I'm leaving them on purpose so that they can do that. I've heard it said that if you plant calendula once, you'll never have to plant it again, and I'm perfectly all right with that. I think calendula is one of the top 3, if not the #1 companion plant I recommend having in your garden, because not only is it medicinal for humans, but it just draws in so many beneficial insects. Now, if you let the seed pods kind of dry out, get brown and crispy, they have some really weird looking seeds, and supposedly they will self-sow and kind of cold stratify over the winter. I have not had this happen for me yet. It may be because I don't let enough of them go to seed, because I'm picking the flower heads and drying them for my teas, but it's worth experimenting with. If you've got some calendula in your garden and you don't really feel like saving a whole ton of it for next year, try planting it now. It's a wildflower, so it can be surface sown, and that's what I do when I intentionally plant it. So if you've got some in your garden, just pinch off that head and sprinkle it around and see what comes up next year. Another one of my top 3 for companion plants that really, it goes to seed very quickly and very often throughout the entire growing season is marigolds. Marigolds and calendula do seem really similar, but they're actually part of entirely different plant groups, and I do like to have both in my garden. I think marigolds are a little bit better for repelling hornworms and things like that around my tomatoes. I swear, you save a single marigold flower and you are set for life. You will never have to buy a marigold again, because they just have so many seeds in each individual flower. These are another one you just want to let dry on the plant before you pick it. One that's really fun that I haven't seen yet in the garden this year are snapdragons, because they actually look like tiny little spooky skulls when they dry. They're really beautiful, and I think foxglove will do that too. They kind of have this very spooky look to them when they dry. I also let my lettuce go to seed. It comes up with these tiny little beautiful dainty flowers that are sometimes yellow, sometimes white, and the stalks will get huge. Like, if you let your lettuce bolt, it will get so tall, like 3 or 4 feet tall, and then put off this show of tiny little flowers. But you don't want to pick it until those flowers turn into almost like, they're kind of like dandelions. Like, they're these little puff balls that come off of them, and they have like little floaters to help them get caught by the wind. And of course, lettuce seeds are tiny, so it can be kind of a pain to save them. This is another one where if you want to just clip off the whole top of that flowering head into a bag and let it really dry out, then you could probably just shake the bag and get those lettuce seeds loose. That's like infinite lettuce. Like, you will not believe how many lettuce seeds you can get off of a single lettuce plant. You will never have to buy lettuce again. I did already kind of allude to this one. Saving squash seeds can give you a huge amount. I feel like when we get a packet of squash seeds, it's like 5 or 10 seeds, which, I mean, how many squash do you really need to grow in a year? But you save seeds from one single butternut and you've got butternut for life. Again, it may hybridize if you're growing other types of squash in your garden or pumpkins or your neighbors are, but it can be fun to experiment too. Like we had some sugar pie pumpkins last year that I saved seeds from, and we didn't have any other squash or pumpkins growing near them at all, but they still managed to hybridize, and now I have white sugar pie pumpkins. So you never really know what you're gonna get, which can be kind of risky with such a large plant like a squash or a pumpkin, but it's fun. If you want to try saving your tomato seeds, this is one where it gets a little bit trickier than just kind of getting those seeds separated from the fruit and letting them dry out fully before you store them. Because with tomato seeds, they actually do better if you can let them ferment in their own kind of gelatinous goo inside the fruit before you dry them. This just kind of breaks down the exterior coating, so you'll have a higher germination rate next year. It's not absolutely vital. The thing with tomatoes is they can cross-pollinate, and a lot of the times we're growing tomatoes in very close quarters together and lots of different varieties. So it can happen. It's less likely because tomatoes are generally self-pollinating. They just need wind to kind of pollinate. But if they're very close together, it can happen, and you might get a new tomato variety that maybe isn't as good as the tomato you intended to grow. To ferment it, I just scoop out the guts of the tomato, put it in a mason jar with like some cheesecloth over the lid for like 3 days-ish until there's like a mold on top. You kind of take that mold off, and then you can rinse the rest of the goo off the seeds and let them dry. I would not let them dry on a paper towel because they tend to fuse to the paper towel, which can be really annoying if you want to separate it fully from that material. So letting it dry on like a flat surface that you can easily pop them off of, because they will kind of get glued down. Now, when it comes to storing your seeds that you're saving for next year, if you're not just sprinkling them wildly around the garden like I'm trying to do, there's a couple things that you can do. Main goals are we want a cool, dark, dry place. You can use something as simple as a brown paper bag. You could use a mailing envelope. You could fold your own little origami seed envelopes. I've seen it. My cousin did this. It was really cool. You could stick them in mason jars, but generally the seeds don't take up that much room, so it can kind of feel like a waste of space. What I've been doing since last year has felt like the solution, at least for me. I have this little seed chest, and I will link this down below. This one got customized with my name, but you can put anything you want on it, or just like a generic flower design. So the lid just slides off. It doesn't come with the vials. It's something you get like separately on Amazon, but the creator of the box has the exact link to the ones that fit inside. And the holes are like laser cut, so they're really not like going anywhere. There's just little circles that they sit in. I love this because I don't need to save a million of every type of seed, and unless a seed is really big, like I got plenty of them in here. Like these are the Easter egg radish seeds, even my mammoth sunflowers, which are very large seeds. I still have a decent amount in here. So this is like, I think, going to be the top thing that I'm recommending for people for like gift giving for this winter too, for the holidays, because it's just so pretty, it's so functional, and it's like really surprisingly affordable for something that's like custom and beautiful and built to last. The only other thing I will say when it comes to saving seeds is when we get seed packets, a lot of times they will have an expiration date on them. Very few seeds actually expire when those expiration dates are stamped on. They usually last at least 3 to 5 years if stored properly. The exception to this would be something like carrots. Really doesn't last more than a year. And what this means is it's just going to affect the germination rate, right? So you can test germination. You can just kind of try to sprout a few seeds in between some damp paper towels. If they sprout, you know the seeds are still good and you can use them in your garden. But that's everything that I'm saving for seeds from my garden right now. I hope this was helpful. Make sure you hit like and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos, and let me know if you have any questions about seed saving, if there's something that I missed that you want me to cover next time. Thank you so much for gardening with me, and happy growing.